Good morning. My name is Kevin Meckling, and for those of you who don't know, I am filling in for Steve during the month of February. This month, we will be looking at four overarching themes that can be found in the Gospel of John. Last week, we looked at why did Jesus come? And this week, we will be looking at our second theme, Jesus has always been in control. But before we dive into our theme for today, I'd like to share a little bit more of my heart with you. Last week I shared about the Brick House program of Loving Shepherd Ministry. This week I'd like to go into more detail about how God has strategically positioned the church in the United States to meet the needs of the foster care system. It's pretty common knowledge that the foster care system is experiencing more placements than any other time in our country's history. But the good news is that God has strategically positioned the church in the United States to meet those needs. There are more than enough resources in the church to meet the current needs of the foster care system. If just one family in each church in the United States would become a licensed foster home, there would be more than enough homes for all the children in foster care. Not just any home, but a Christian home. Not only would there be enough homes for all the children in foster care, but if each family in the Christian church in the United States would give 10% of their income, there would be more than enough money to meet all the financial needs of the foster care system. God has strategically positioned the church in the United States with more than enough. The Christian Alliance for Orphans, or better known as CAFO, is a national organization that helps the church engage with the foster care system. If you go to morethanenough.cafo.com, they will walk you through the process of learning how God has strategically positioned you to help meet the need. Michelle and I would love to talk to you more about this after the service. The theme from John that we're going to be looking at today is Jesus has always been in control. When I first sat down and titled this theme, the title was Jesus was always in control, focusing on the time that he walked the earth about 2,000 years ago. But John is very clear from the outset of his gospel that not only was Jesus in control while he was on earth, Jesus was in control before he ever stepped on earth. As a matter of fact, Jesus was in control before there ever was an earth. As I said last week, there's not one specific passage that we're going to focus on today. We'll be looking at the overarching story that John is telling in his gospel. We'll be flipping through each passage pretty quickly. I've put scripture references in your handout so that you can go home this week and you can look at each one of those passages in its context. But let's turn to John chapter 1 to start out. Today we are going to be looking at 8 examples of how Jesus has always been in control. Our time here together will be a helpful reminder of Jesus' ministry while he walked on the earth. And just as importantly, it has significant implications for our lives today. In his gospel, John presents Jesus as always being in control of his life and ministry. Jesus is very specific, not only about obeying the Father's will, but also about obeying the timing of the Father's will. In John 10:18, Jesus is talking about his life, and he says that, "No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have the right to lay it down, and I have the right to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father." For our first example, Jesus was in control before time began, before creation, and all throughout creation. John makes this abundantly clear from the very beginning of his gospel. John states in his first 4 verses that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. Jesus was also in control from the time of his very first miracle. In John chapter 2, Jesus goes to a wedding in Cana with his family and his disciples. When the wedding party runs out of wine, his mother tells him to fix the problem. Jesus makes it clear from his response that timing is important when he states, "My hour has not yet come." Jesus acts in his perfect timing. Jesus does end up honoring his mother's request, but he makes it clear that in his life and ministry, what he does on his, or better yet, his Father's timing. For our third example, John shows that Jesus is in control of his life and ministry by describing several times how he slips away. In John 6, when the crowd sees Jesus miraculously multiply a boy's small lunch so that there's more than enough to feed over 5,000 people, they attempt to take Jesus and make him their king. But Jesus' mission was not to be a worldly political king. That was not the type of messiahship that he came to fulfill. John 6:15 says that when Jesus realized that they were about to take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. In John 7, Jesus is in Jerusalem during the Festival of Shelters. Jesus is speaking to the crowds in the temple. He offends the Jews by claiming that God is his personal father. In verse 30, John records that they tried to seize him, yet no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. His ministry is not complete, and therefore it is not time for him to be arrested. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. Shortly afterwards, the Pharisees send servants to go arrest Jesus. But after hearing Jesus speak, they return to the Pharisees empty-handed, because as John records in 7:46, no man ever spoke like this. His ministry is not complete, and therefore it is not time for him to be arrested. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. In John 8, Jesus is still in Jerusalem at the Festival of Shelters, speaking to the crowds in the temple. Again, he offends some of the Pharisees by claiming that God is his personal father. While the text does not say specifically that they tried to arrest Jesus, John states in 8:20 that he spoke these words by the treasury while teaching in the temple, but no one seized him because his hour had not yet come. Jesus' ministry is not complete, and therefore it is not time for him to be arrested. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. In John 10, Jesus returns to Jerusalem for the Festival of Dedication. Again, Jesus is speaking to the crowds in the temple. Again, he offends the Jews by claiming that God is his personal father. John 10:31 through 33 says, "Again, the Jews picked up rocks to stone him. Jesus replied, 'I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these works are you stoning me?' 'We aren't stoning you for a good work,' the Jews answered, 'but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God.'" Jesus' interaction in the temple ends in John 10:39, with the Jews trying again to seize him, but he escaped their grasp. His ministry is not complete, and therefore it is not time for him to be arrested. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. Our fourth example is found in John 13, as Jesus begins his journey toward the cross. In verse 1, John summarizes what is going through Jesus' mind when he states, "Before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." So far, all throughout John's Gospel, the time has not yet come. But with the beginning of chapter 13, the story of Jesus that John is telling switches gear. Jesus knows that his time has come. John 13:2 states, "Now when it was time for supper, the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God." Moving down to verse 18, Jesus says, "I'm not speaking about all of you. I know those I have chosen, but the scripture must be fulfilled. The one who eats my bread has raised his heel against me. I'm telling you this now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am he. Truly I tell you, whoever receives anyone I send receives me, and the one who receives me receives him who sent me." When Jesus had said this, he was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples started looking at each other, uncertain which one he was speaking about. One of his disciples, the one Jesus loved, was reclining close beside Jesus. Simon Peter motioned to him to find out who it was he was talking about. So he leaned back against Jesus and asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus replied, "He's the one I give the piece of bread to after I've dipped it." When he had dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas, Simon Iscariot's son. After Judas ate the piece of bread, Satan entered him. So Jesus told him, "What you're doing, do quickly." Jesus does not shrink away from the mission given to him by the Father. He sets the plan into motion. Jesus knew that it was Judas who was going to betray him. Jesus allowed Judas to recline at the table. Jesus washed Judas' feet. It was only after Jesus gave Judas the piece of bread that he left to betray Jesus. It was only after Jesus told him, "What you're doing, do quickly," that Judas left. It was Jesus who controlled his own destiny. It is Jesus who sets into motion the events that will lead up to his glorification, his arrest, his crucifixion, his resurrection, and his ascension. It is only after Jesus commissions him, giving him permission, that Judas leaves to betray Jesus. Bible scholar Craig S. Keener states that Jesus here remains in control, so that the devil, like Judas, essentially executes Jesus' will concerning the passion. Again, Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. In John 18, there's this little interaction that, again, if we do not take the time to look at it closely, it's easy for us to miss. It's easy for us to fill in the blanks and read the story of Jesus' arrest without realizing how John is telling the story. John 18:3 states, "So Judas took a company of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, went out and said to them, 'Who is it that you're seeking?' 'Jesus of Nazareth,' they answered. 'I am he,' Jesus told them. Judas, who betrayed him, was also standing with them. When Jesus told them, 'I am he,' they stepped back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, 'Who is it that you're seeking?' 'Jesus of Nazareth,' they said. 'I told you I am he,' Jesus replied. 'So if you're looking for me, let these men go.' This was to fulfill the words he had said, 'I have not lost one of those you have given me.'" Just picture yourself there that night in the garden. Judas, as Jesus' betrayer, leads a very large group of people to arrest Jesus. They come prepared for resistance. A Roman company of soldiers was a technical term for 600 soldiers. When they say that they are looking for Jesus, Jesus says, "I am he." What is their reaction? They step back and fell to the ground. Here you have up to 600 men with lanterns, torches, and weapons. And what is their reaction when Jesus, one person, says, "I am he"? They step back and fall to the ground. Jesus is in complete control. This large military presence sets the stage to show that Jesus willingly accepted the cup of suffering that the Father prepared for him. The reaction of this professional military when Jesus reveals his true identity proves that Jesus held all the power that night in the garden. This armed cohort was rendered useless by 3 simple words. Jesus made sure that he was arrested to fulfill the plan of God. Just as the narrative indicates, Jesus had the power and ability to escape as he had done before. But now, Jesus' hour had come. It was now time for him to be arrested and to drink the cup that the Father had prepared for him. With his public ministry now complete, it is time for him to be arrested. John 18:12 states, "Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus and tied him up." Again, Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. A 5th way that Jesus has always been in control is by allowing Pilate to find him guilty. Turning to John 19, Jesus is standing before Pilate. Pilate is looking for a way to release Jesus because he has found Jesus guilty of nothing. In verse 10, Pilate tells Jesus, "Don't you know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you?" "You would have no authority over me at all," Jesus answered, "if it hadn't been given to you from above." Again, Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. Jesus could have made a case for his innocence and perhaps gained his freedom. But Jesus came to fulfill a mission, and he is dedicated to that mission. Jesus knew everything that was going to happen to him. None of this came as a surprise to Jesus. Jesus surrendered himself to the will of God so that everything went according to God's plan. His public ministry is now complete, and it is time for him to be sentenced to death for the sins of the world. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. Later in chapter 19, John's gospel differs from the synoptic versions as Jesus walks to Golgotha. In the synoptic versions, Jesus is too weak on the way to the crucifixion to carry his cross. However, John does not describe the journey to Golgotha in this way. John tells the story a little different from Mark and Matthew and Luke. This is very acceptable practice in ancient literature. The ancients were more concerned with the overarching story than the accuracy of every minute detail. John is not lying. He's just more concerned about the spiritual metaphor that Jesus willingly carried his cross. John 19:17 states, "Carrying his cross by himself, he went out to what is called Place of the Skull," which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. His ministry is complete, and now it is time for him to carry his own cross to the crucifixion. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. Bible scholar F.F. Bruce states that John is not deliberately contradicting the synoptic account of Simon of Cyrene. He is rather emphasizing that, as at his arrest in the garden, Jesus is still in command of the situation. Keener states that no one takes Jesus' life from him. He offers it up freely. By emphasizing Jesus carrying his own cross, he emphasizes Jesus' continuing control of his passion. In our final example of Jesus having control over his life and ministry, Jesus voluntarily completes his mission. Jesus hangs on the cross, stripped of every earthly possession he had. Jesus has given up everything. Jesus has surrendered to the mission the Father has set before him. John 19:28 states, "After this, when Jesus knew that everything was now finished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, he said, 'I am thirsty.' A jar full of sour wine was sitting there. So they fixed a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it up to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." Then bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. When Jesus realized that he had accomplished everything set before him, he declared his mission completed and willingly gave up his spirit. This verse makes it clear that first, Jesus made sure that he completed the mission given to him by the Father perfectly, and second, he willingly died on the cross for the sins of the world. Keener states that Jesus himself remains in control of the events surrounding his death, consciously fulfilling Scripture. Only after Jesus knew that everything was finished, only after he knew that he had fulfilled all Scripture, only after he declared it is finished, only after his mission is completed, only then does Jesus give up his spirit. Jesus is in complete control of his life and ministry. This is the story that John is telling. When John originally penned this gospel almost 2,000 years ago, his audience was going through extreme persecution. The temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed. The Jewish Christians had been kicked out of the synagogues. Their access to the community had been impeded. Gentile Christians were being persecuted in the community and the marketplace. All Christians were being ostracized. So John sits down and he writes a gospel communicating the good news that from the beginning of time, Jesus has always been in control. John sits down and writes a gospel communicating the good news that during his entire life and ministry, Jesus has always been in control. This good news is just as true for us today in our current culture as it was the day that John wrote it almost 2,000 years ago. Before creation, Jesus was in control. When he performed his first miracle in Cana, Jesus was in control. When he slipped away after feeding the 5,000, after claiming to be God's son, after amazing the Pharisees' servants, after speaking in the treasury, after the Jews tried to stone him, Jesus was in control. When he commissioned Judas to betray him, Jesus was in control. When he allowed himself to be arrested, Jesus was in control. When he allowed Pilate to find him guilty, Jesus was in control. When he picked up his cross, Jesus was in control. When he gave up his spirit, Jesus was in control. During his entire life and ministry, Jesus was always in control. One of the main overarching themes of John's gospel is that Jesus has always been in control. Today, Jesus is in control. How should we respond? Well, there's two ways that we can respond. First of all, as Jesus people, we have nothing to fear or be anxious about because Jesus has always been in control. And second, as Jesus people, we need to continue the work that he started by bringing his kingdom to earth. Jesus has always been in control, and Jesus is just as much in control today as he ever has been. As Jesus' church, we need to live as if Jesus was in control. Revelation 22:11 through 17. Jesus says, "Let the unrighteous go on in unrighteousness. Let the filthy still be filthy. Let the righteous go on in righteousness. Let the holy still be holy. Look, I am coming soon, and my reward is with me to repay each person according to his work. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter the city by the gates. Outside are the dogs, the sorcerers, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to attest these things to you for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. Both the Spirit and the bride say, 'Come.' Let anyone who hears say, 'Come.' Let the one who is thirsty come. Let the one who desires take the water of life freely.